Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
If your eyes are the windows to your soul, and your glasses are the windows to your eyes, then it's pretty important to find your perfect frames. That's why at Warby Parker, we've made shopping for eyewear as easy and fun as can be. Peruse endless styles in our stores, or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. To find your next favorite pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to locate your nearest Warby Parker store, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm the therapist, Tess Brigham. And normally Brooke would chime in right now and say that she's Brooke Brigham, the attorney. But we actually, this episode, I'm super excited for because we interviewed a longtime friend of mine that I knew back in my Hollywood days. His wife and I worked together. His name's Oliver Oertel. And Oliver he's a veteran reality TV producer, having worked on such well-known shows as House Hunters, Iron Chef America, The Little Couple, I Am Jazz, among others. He's tackled nearly every genre in reality TV, from makeover shows and competition shows to real estate, home renovation, follow docs, and docu-soaps. With a background in comedy, theater, and independent film, he has made several short films and web series. Most recently, his documentary, DancingDADS, has begun streaming on Amazon and Google Play. So Oliver has a long history of working on reality shows like Smothered and Little People, Big World and I Am Jazz on the TLC network. So we thought it would be a lot of fun to have him come on the show and talk about just sort of what it's like to create these shows, to be someone who works on these shows. What does it really take to put together a show? As a Sister Wives fan, we complain a lot about how long it takes them to come up with a new season, right? But after talking to Oliver, it's you get a real sense and an understanding of why it takes so long. So hopefully you enjoy the interview. Thanks so much. Bye. Welcome to the show, Oliver.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So, tell us a little bit about you and your background. We knew each other. Oliver and I met through his wife, Megan. Megan and I worked together at a small or mid-sized talent agency together as assistants. And those jobs are very long hours and very intense. So you get to know the people that you work with very, very well. And we became friends and we're still friends today. That's how I know Oliver. But tell us about you and your background and what brought you to Hollywood and
well, yeah, at that time, I had exactly. I had been, doing, making short films and doing independent stuff in Chicago, doing improv. And when we came here, while you guys were working together, while you and my wife were working together, I was working at Denovi Pictures, which was, a production company that had to do with Warner Brothers, and we're making feature films, and that was exciting. That was like the job that was like the parade of movie stars every day, because people were always coming in. Denise had a lot going on. And so it was just basically convincing me that this dream was real, that job was. But after about 2 years of that, I realized that so much of the job was me reading other people's scripts and looking for excuses to say no. And that started to sort of chip away at my excitement. And I didn't want that to happen. So, and it didn't leave me a lot of time for doing my own projects.
Yeah.
I think it was Ryan Johnson, who I heard in an interview recently say that when he got out of film school, he got a job as a preschool teacher. Because he said, your job should not be industry related because, anyway, blah, blah, blah. It'll give you more time.
Yeah.
To not have an industry related job will free you up to have more time to make your films and do your stuff, which is actually pretty good advice. But I left, and I kind of left Denovi, kind of wandered around for a little bit looking for what that thing would be. I started at a production company that was doing History Channel documentaries. Mm-hmm. And that was my first sort of footstep into unscripted television. Mm-hmm. Unscripted. I'm using finger quotes, air quotes right now, because, we'll find.
Is that what they used to call reality TV, basically?
They still call it that, actually. Yeah. They still try to, but it's not unscripted. That's the thing.
Right.
The reason I use air quotes is that it's always scripted. It's just scripted after it's been shot. That's the only difference. Mm-hmm. As opposed to shooting a script that but we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from there, I landed a job at a company called Evolution. I started off as a story assistant on a show called Switched, which was a really fun show where two teenagers would switch lives for 4 days. Oh. And text each other challenges. And it was really cute. Very sweet show. Loved it. And after about 3 episodes of that, they promoted me to story producing. And I've been doing that ever since.
So explain to us, what does a story producer do?
And how is it different from a story editor?
Oh, so the terminology gets used differently depending on what company you're at. When I was a story assistant, they now call those story editors, and they call what they used to call story editors. So I was actually promoted to story editor, but that job was really what they now call story producing.
Okay, got it.
So it's all about glamorizing a job,
making you feel important.
Yeah, without calling us writers. Because we are non-union. Which actually worked to our benefit when the writers went on strike last year. I was able to keep working through all that, which is great. But yeah, so I got promoted after. So what a story producer job essentially is the executive producers and talent. They get together, and field directors and all that, and field producers, field director, field producer, kind of interchangeable sometimes too. They'll go out into the field and plan what they're going to shoot, usually based around the events of the lives of the people on the show. Mm-hmm. We got this wedding coming up. Okay, so we're going to shoot the wedding, and you'll go here and you'll come there, and this person will be there. They'll try to shoot something. And once they get there, whatever happens kind of happens. Mm-hmm. Usually with some direction, with the intention of going, in this scene, we have to cover this information. So make sure that gets out. Mm-hmm. And if it goes off in some different direction, the field producer will then, sometimes let it go off in that direction to see what they get, but always then go back and do pickup shots to make sure we have the story that they were trying to get. Mm-hmm. Am I making sense?
Yeah. I'm wondering, what about those scenes that you see where it's obviously created, like it's not, we have a wedding to go to, or it's more like, we're going to go to Color Me Mine today.
Eat some bowls.
Yeah. Who decides that? How does that fit in? Is that just filler? Or
no, it depends, because you want to get to know the character. Like, for example, and I use the word characters. I always do, even though they're real people. I do use the word characters because that's how we treat them. And I don't mean that like we treat them that way so we can abuse them. We actually try to make them always look as good as possible. At least on the shows I've been lucky enough to work on. Well, yeah. So actually, it's funny. Color Me Mine. I did an episode of a show. It was a facial surgery show, and it was this young woman and her dad. And in the lead up to going to the doctor, they actually filmed them at a Color Me Mine. Yeah. And, but the idea was just to establish who these people are, what their relationship is in a normal setting. Again, I did air quotes again. Yeah. We're not on video, but I keep doing air quotes. But, what their relationship is so that we know them and we like them and we care about what happens to them, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they'll try to think about something a scenario to shoot them in that lets them relax and be themselves. And
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and show us who they are to each other.
So for your role, you're never out in the field. Are you the person who they've shot everything? And so you're the person that's looking at everything and trying to figure out, okay, where's the story, in these hundreds of hours of television that we have, what's the story of the season?
Exactly. So typically what'll happen is sometimes if it's a really organized production, they'll give me an outline of what they want it to be. Mm-hmm. What they hope it can be. But inevitably, there's things that happen in the field that are interesting, exciting, and you want to follow those threads. So what I do is I'll be given for like a 2-minute scene, sometimes I'll be given a 3-hour chunk of footage.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of it is camera resetting or, everybody stopping and redoing what they just did because, you said this thing and that's interesting. And they didn't hear you say it, but let's pursue that. So they'll try to recreate that moment, not in the sense of writing it or making it up, but they go, this is something that came out that the talent perhaps didn't expect to say or expect to come out, but now it's there and you can't ignore it, because it's something about their relationship. And so it's something that's interesting. And this could affect, sometimes those things could affect an entire C story arc through the rest of the episode or season even.
So do the characters ever say, no, I don't want to reshoot that? Or maybe they realize they said something.
More often than not, what they tend to do is there's usually somebody there that's new to the production. Like, for example, if they go to a store or something like that, right? I have this editor friend that always calls it, let's say they go to a jewelry store. The person that welcomes them to the jewelry store, my editor friend always calls them the mayor of the jewelry store. Hi, come on in, welcome. And let me know if there's anything we can do. I can show you around. So usually what I find, to directly answer your question, is that the talent gets very used to retaking things or stopping, walking back out so they can bring the cameras inside of a place and then walking through the door again, things like that. And it's kind of funny how often the people in the show start explaining to the newcomer how it works without the field producer having to do it.
Interesting.
But so, all that stuff, we're really just looking for the most interesting and concise bits that don't make the talent, again, on the shows that I've worked on, that don't make the talent look bad, because I think if you put a camera on any of us for 3 hours, it'd be really hard to come off looking good and not say things that you wish you hadn't said or whatever. So it's always been a personal ethic of mine is to try to make them look as good as possible.
Yeah, because ultimately, if the audience doesn't like these people, they're not going to watch.
Yeah, right.
We like drama to a certain degree. It starts to get uncomfortable, at least for me anyway. Sometimes it's kind of cringy if they go push it a little too far. I mean, a lot of the shows you've worked on are on TLC, which is kind of a softer, gentler touch than.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say Smothered on TLC was the closest I ever got to one of those table flipping shows because it was a fun show to work on. It really was.
Did you work on which season? Sorry, which season did you work on?
I think it was season 4.
Okay.
I think it was season 4. Yeah. It was the couple that owned the pizza place and her mom. And,
the mom who looks like Gene Simmons.
Oh,
yes.
Because I was watching
Kathy and Kathy, I think is the mom, and can't remember the daughters.
Yes,
they're great. They're great.
They were really fun to work with. And then I think also that season we had Laura Lee and I mean it's been a couple of years since I worked on the show now, so I'm trying to remember their names, but it was the ones that just had the baby.
Yeah.
Just, the 2 women who were married to each other that just had a baby, and the one woman's mom was overbearing about it. That's just the premise of the show. I don't mind saying overbearing.
Yeah. The mom wanted to be the one to artificially inseminate her daughter.
Oh my God.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the couple. Yeah. And she did. She actually did it in season 3. Yeah. And so the partner, really
she didn't
had to deal with it.
Yeah.
Had to deal with that reality. Yeah. So that's one of those things that some shows can get pretty wild and over the top like that,
Do you have any sense of how a show like that came about? So I watched Smothered in preparation of us talking today. I knew about the show and I knew the premise of the show, and I started watching season 1, episode 1, and I was like, "Well, this is good." Like I'm hooked. Like I'm really hooked on the show. And so what I was thinking, do you have any sense of how these shows come about? Did someone happen to be bebopping around their lives, like Evolution, someone from Evolution or some production company, and they're like, "God, this mother and daughter are really close. That's really weird. Is there a show there?" And then, maybe we should find some other mothers and daughters that could we find other pairs like this? I'm just wondering, is this or do they say, you know what, let's try to find mothers and daughters?
It's interesting. The development departments have their fingers in so many pies. They're watching YouTube constantly. Like I worked on a car build show with these two brothers. They just found them because they were doing car repair on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And they said, these guys are charismatic. Let's see if they want to do a show for Motor Trend, stuff like that. So it's either like YouTube channels, or they'll read newspaper articles or see news stories, or they'll try to find magazine story, anything, just anything at all that leads them in a direction of somebody. And then they'll start pursuing these people, not aggressively, but they'll reach out. Are you interested in doing a show? And then they figure out what kind of show it's going to be. Because if you notice that a lot of the shows tend to be formatted now, right? Mm-hmm. For example, Project Runway and Top Chef are not that different. They're basically the same show. Just one's about fashion, one's about food.
Competition. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's even the same format in terms of the way they eliminate, the way they do the mini competition, and then they do the big competition, Mm-hmm. So a lot of the shows have similar formats. So I think when the development departments reach out to these people, they take that into account, they tell them it's this kind of a show. Mm-hmm. That we're thinking about. So they find them, and then casting gets involved, and the casting directors put out casting calls, which it surprises me how much people respond to casting calls. I personally cannot imagine wanting to be on a reality show.
Me neither.
It just seems like such intense scrutiny, and so many people form opinions about you that you have no control over if you're talent on a reality show.
But there's obviously a lot of people who welcome it, and it's no problem. And I think they see more benefit to it than, the good outweighs the bad.
Oh, for sure. I think it's a kind of fame that does stick, and you can definitely make something of it. Especially we just saw there's a commercial running right now that has people from Love Island or something like that on it. Megan was saying, these are actual, my wife was telling me, those are actually people from that show, but it's a commercial for a product that I don't know. Huh. But it's actually the people from one of those dating reality shows on the island. I think it was Love Island.
And my guess would be, right, once you start working with Evolution and these companies in TLC, right, it's job by job by job. So I'm assuming that's how you're getting your next job, right? I would assume that once you get into that TLC world, right, it's sort of like, okay, more and more of the TLC shows. Was there ever a time where you were like, I want to get out of this, I'd like to go to Bravo, or I'd like to go over here, do something else? Or was it like, no, this was good. I really enjoyed this format.
The hardest kind of show to do is a docusoap.
Okay, what's a docusoap?
So docusoap
Real Housewives?
is that sort of thing. Or even, I worked on a show called I Am Jazz on TLC, which is about a trans teenager. And so, we're doing something I thought was important, but they're just really hard because that's where you get the 3-hour chunk of footage that you have to whittle down to a 2-minute scene. It can go a million different directions. Mm-hmm. So after a few years of doing that, I was really hungry to do like a car build show, for example, or a makeover show or something like that, where you have a beginning and an end, and you basically look at the ending result, and that tells you what you're going to focus on through the rest of the episode.
So you've worked on, give us the name of one of the home makeover shows that you worked on.
It wasn't just home makeover shows. Again, I say makeover shows because it's a genre. I think it's a genre that you can plug almost anything into as well. Kind of like I was saying about Project Runway. All right, so my first show I ever did was, the second show I ever did was Clean Sweep.
Okay, so what's the premise of Clean Sweep? Clean
Sweep was they would come in, they would clean out somebody's mess, and then they would redo 2 of their rooms.
Got it. Okay, and so
they had. The star of the show was this organizer and a designer, and the 2 of them would work together, and they would get rid of a bunch of junk and have a yard sale and use that money to redo the room.
How do I get on
that?
that
Was the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to get on that show.
Isn't that the one where they would take literally everything out of the house and put it on the front lawn and they'd sort through it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That was a while ago now. That show hasn't been on the air for a while, but Peter Walsh, who was the organizer on the show, ended up doing a bunch of stuff with Oprah after that. And then now he's got a show in Australia called, I can't remember the name, Space Invaders, I think it's called.
So for like an episode of Clean Sweep, so you have all this footage and then they say to you, okay, this is the final. So you watch that first and you see like, do they like the rooms? Do they not like the rooms? So from that, okay, once you see that, you're like, okay, I know what the story is. And then you go back to the beginning and start. Yeah,
pretty much. Because, and not only that, they would build pieces of furniture for them and stuff. And so when you would watch the ending, when you watch the reveal, you would know what the client gravitated to. You would go, oh, I love this dresser that you brought in. Okay, so now we're going to pay attention. The dresser is the story thread now.
Got it.
That sort of thing.
And how much control do you have? Sorry, how much control do you have on the story?
I like to say that the story tells me what it wants to be. We have some freedom. I think they rely on story producers a lot. So we never really finished the definition of a story producer.
Okay.
But, so and I think that'll feed into answering the question you just asked me. So then the footage comes back from the field, what they attempted to shoot comes back from the field. We find the story in it, and I pass it along to the video editor. The video editor and I work together to shape it, because the video editor almost always says, I see what you were trying to do here. I think it can be more of this. And we'll go, okay, well, let's make it more of that. And then we'll make it more of that. And then we'll show it to the exec producer. And the exec producer will go, I see what you were both trying to do. Now let's try to steer it back to what we intended. And then we would do that. And then it'll go to network.
Got it. So they had the final
different
say.
Rounds of notes.
Okay.
Yeah. Network has the final say. Whatever they want is what we end up doing. Although a good co-EP will push back and fight for what they want the show to be. But ultimately, the network decides what goes on the air. So, and
then I know from your resume, you also listed senior story editor, story producer. Is there a difference?
Somewhat. Sometimes you get a little more. It's fluid. There's some shows where there's people who are just just got promoted from being story assistants, right, or story APs, and now you end up guiding them a little bit, or you end up looking at their string outs and.
What's a string out?
Sorry, I'm using terminology. A string out is what that 2 minute, actually the roughly 4 minute cut that becomes the 2 minute scene. So you take the 3 hours, cut it down to about 4 or 5 minutes, and then that becomes the 2 minute scene in the end.
Got it.
So that 4 or 5 minute section is the string out, where you've just strung together the story beats, because the video editor has to make it all polished and pretty. We just have to make the story make sense. So, you'll look at their string outs and maybe say, we don't need this beat, or what about that thing that isn't tracking from this other scene, things like that. It's really just senior story. It's again, it's a fluid title. It's not a very official title.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like this sounds like a lot of work. Like this sounds like it's days and days and days of, to just get one episode, days of.
Oh, it's weeks. Yeah.
Weeks.
Several
yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. Because you're getting it down to such a micro level. You're just starting with so much. And, that's a lot of work.
Or, if they didn't say the word that you needed them to say, and maybe you can find it in another scene and cut away from them and they can say that word.
Oh, wait, what? Hold on. Is that really?
Yeah.
Because that's creative editing.
It absolutely happens all the time.
Really?
Wow. Or it depends on the kind of show. It depends what they're trying to accomplish. But I knew a guy that worked on one of those dating competition shows, kind of a Bachelor format, but it was not The Bachelor. It was some other shit. I can't remember. It was years ago. Yeah, basically they would try to narrow down who these people were, what their characters were, right? So like it was a guy who was the person they were all competing to date. And so like a woman would say something like, they'd be asking her broad questions like, what do you like to do on the weekend? Well, I like to do, I like to walk in the park, or, go to church with my family. The minute she said the word church, they were like, okay, she's the churchy one. And then, I know. And then they would only select scenes that led in that direction for her. They would only select material for her that led in that direction because they wanted the character to be that clearly defined, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if she's talking about something that goes against that, but against that character that they've devised for her, this makes it sound really bad, but it's really just about keeping it clear and easy to digest as a viewer. But if she said something that was going against the fact that, maybe she wasn't actually a big churchgoer, they wouldn't use it. Or if they had to use the sentence she was saying, they would cut away from something, like they're interviewing her, blah, 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 cut away to a shot of something else, cut back to her, and they've removed the words that they didn't need, for example.
To keep her character consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. And you can make somebody say the opposite of what they meant by cutting away. And that does happen.
So there is such a thing as a bad edit.
Yes, yes. So that's
because these reality people, they always say, "Well, I got a bad edit, and that's I'm not really like that. And that didn't really happen. I got a bad edit."
Yeah, when I was on the Little Couple, the couple Bill and Jen. I don't know if you've ever seen them on TLC.
Yeah, is it Little Couple Big World?
Well, there's Little People Big World. I've done 5 Little People shows for TLC.
Oh, okay. And it's not the same family. I thought it was always the same. It's different family.
It's different.
Okay.
It's 5 different shows that I did, and there's even more than that. TLC had a whole thing about little people for a while. I even interviewed for a show that never actually went. It was called Small, Medium, at Large. It was about a little person psychic who was going around and helping people.
Oh my God! I think I just got it.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were trying to make that happen, and it didn't really happen. But
the title alone,
I mean,
crazy.
Yeah.
But so Bill and Jen came into town one time. They lived in Texas at the time, and they came into town to see the visit the production company and do stuff here. Actually, I think they were doing their in vitro attempts were happening here in Encino, California. And there was a small lunch where we all went to lunch with them and got to talk. So I was talking to Bill, the husband, for quite a bit. And he said, it's strange. He's like, sometimes I'll watch the episodes and you'll cut together one story from this date and another story from like months later. Mm-hmm. And it's actually changing our memories about when all this stuff happened. But like, why don't you just show our real lives? And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't think you really want people to know your real movements, right? You don't want people to know your real life. Because what if somebody comes along and wants to follow you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the thing is that I'm sorry, but real life is boring. Our lives are boring. Getting up every day, brushing your teeth, putting your kids to bed, like all of that stuff's boring. And that's why that's why we turn on the TV. It's why we watch these shows. So they have to, it's for entertainment's sake. Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you were describing how they decide very early on these are the characters and how people have to fit into these boxes. And when I'm thinking about television or a show like The Golden Girls, because I'm so hip and new. But The Golden Girls was a show where they had these 4 women had distinct personalities and there was sort of like one track that they would follow. But at the same time, they weren't just that one person, but that was sort of how they based the jokes and based the storylines and based everything based on the fact that Blanche, liked men and Rose was stupid or not very bright, right? So it sounds like it's sort of the same premise, like where we have to draw these very distinct lines and show people in this very exaggerated way. Because it sounds like that's sort of the formula that works for television in a way.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Ultimately, it's still a cast of characters who interact with each other in a specific way that people come to expect them to act with each other. Even if they've never seen it on any other scripted show before or whatever. It's like I Am Jazz was their family. There was the dad, he was very straight-laced. There was the mom who was like very concerned and very worried. And there were the 2 brothers who was twins. And one of them really thought of himself as very serious and a go-getter. And the other one was kind of a party dude. And then Jazz was the teenage girl who was the star of the show. And she had her friends. So every character had its place in the cast. Mm-hmm. It's not like we would change who they were or present them other than who they were. But like on any show, you just go, you want to know quickly, you want to distill who is this person so that the audience can follow it.
And, you know what to expect.
Especially in a one-off show like one of these surgery shows where the person's going to be on this episode and you're not going to see them again. From the beginning of the episode to the end in 42 minutes, you have to get us to know and like this person, really hope that they have a great outcome. And then give them a resolution and hopefully make them memorable in a very short period of time.
Yeah. I was just wondering, like, what are a couple of, your favorite shows you worked on or projects, and why?
I've done so many, and they're really, I often say I love doing makeover shows. Again, because I like the linear format of it. I like that, it's a very clear beginning and end, and the difference, from where they start to where they finish. I did a show called 10 Years Younger, where they would put them in a box on Hollywood Boulevard, a glass box, and have people come up and go, how old do you think that person is?
Oh, God, I vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a daytime show on TLC. And then at the end, they would go, how young do you think that person looks? In same box, same Hollywood Boulevard location. Those are fun to do because it's just such a clear set of steps, But I like doing real estate shows too, especially on the show that I just did, finished Lakefront Empire. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun too, because it was a different kind of real estate show where we were actually following the lives of the realtors, as opposed to following the clients and are they going to get the house this episode? What are these realtors trying to accomplish in this world of Lake of the Ozarks? Where they were doing all their work, and how were they building their reputations and their careers and that sort of thing, and exploring that through them showing houses to people.
Is this on TLC? Is it a TLC?
It's on HGTV.
Oh, okay.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Lakefront Empire. Yeah.
It's
Lakefront. Okay.
There have been, with the success of selling Sunset and selling the OC and buying Beverly Hills, but those shows are hard to, I watched some of them, but it's sort of like, you put it on in the background and you kind of don't need to follow much, but those shows have become utterly ridiculous because these women are wearing these giant heels. This one woman went to a business meeting and her boobs were about to fall out. Like you just know in real life or in her own personal professional life, she would not have worn that outfit. And so what do you see with any of the shows that you've been working on for a while? Because I can imagine maybe season 1, they're like this, and now you're back on season 3, 4, right? And you're kind of like, oh, something's changing with, you were this person when we first started the show. Yeah, sometimes they start to, read their own press, and buy their own hype, and start to feel like, well, this show doesn't exist without me. So I'm the star of this show, and I have the power here. I don't have to deal with that very often, but it does happen. And it does, I hear it from my co-EPs sometimes that there's a lot more push and pull with the talent. It now feels like they want to call the shots a little bit more. There's also though, like a show like House Hunters that has had so many seasons, so many hundreds of episodes. When I did it, I just did it for a year, but I want to say it was on the air for like 10 years already before I ever did it. One of the exec producers was very interested in casting outside of the box, because what you found with a show like House Hunters is it had been on the air so long, so many people had seen it. People started to come in acting like other people they had seen on the show. Right. And they'd walk in and go, they'd walk into a kitchen and go, I'm not sure how I feel about these cabinets. And then the director would have to stop them down and go, no. You're on TV. You know how you feel about these cabinets. So let's go back. Tell me how you feel about the cabinets. If you don't know how you feel about if you don't know how you feel, nobody else knows how you feel. So just tell me how you feel about the cabinets. Yeah. But they had seen 100 other people on House Hunters go, I don't know how I feel about that. And so they're playing the roles of the house shopper that they'd seen on House Hunters. So after a while, it took a lot of effort on the part of the field team to make sure that they were keeping it fresh. And keeping it real. Having one of these long running reality shows is actually, it might be more challenging than having one of these other shows in some ways, because people can be. And I think that's why when you see some things like your Real Housewives type shows, I think that's why you see cast members switch in and out. In part, I think a lot of them get tired of doing it, or they find, like for example, Bethany Frankel, found success in all these other areas and wanted to do more. And, she's a big advocate for certain things. So I think they swap things out. They stop being, sorry, I'm trying not to say anything bad here. The bad version is they stop being themselves and start being TV characters. Yeah. Which is not a bad thing to say. And this happens all the time. I mean, we see it, right? We see it all the time because what happens with these housewives shows is the fights that they get into and the arguments become about what happens behind the scenes. And now we are all very savvy and we can kind of figure this out. And because a lot of these people are very public, it has already been out. So we know this is why they're upset. But that's been a huge criticism of the housewives shows is people feel like it needs to evolve. It needs to evolve into something else because it is not what it once was. Yeah. So did you ever have an interest in going over to The Bachelor or Bravo or some of these other kinds of shows? Or
it's interesting. I've been very happy in the cable reality stuff that I've been doing. But it's, I've applied to those jobs before. They're very, Bravo in particular. There's two places, Bravo and True Crime, where they're very kind of, they gatekeep quite a lot. They're like, we want you to have done these shows before, or you shouldn't come work for us.
But if they never hire you, how do you do the shows? How do you get experience? Yeah. So
right, exactly. Maybe you get somebody who's suddenly running the show, who hires you, and then you're in the door. But people would say to me about Bravo, like those Bravo housewife shows, it's just that the notes process is so intense that they want to make sure they got people who have been through it before. I don't know. Notes don't scare me personally.
What is that? Explain what you mean by that, the note process.
All right. So then you put together the episode, you send it to the network. The network comes back with notes. The network typically gets 3 to 4 rounds of notes that they can give you on the episode. So you turn in a rough cut. Sometimes if it's a new show, you'll do 2 rough cuts, a rough cut and a rough cut 2. And then you'll do a fine cut, and then you'll do a locked cut. Now, you would think a locked cut means locked, and it's not changing anymore. And it used to, but not anymore. Now they'll give you lock cut notes, and then you'll do what's called a PL, a pick lock, which is the final lock.
Like you can't make any more changes.
Now I'm going to invent something new. It's the key to the pick lock, and that's another round of notes. I mean, how crazy is that? Like, just call it another round.
I know. And because you're right, because they're not supposed to ask for it, and then they do, and now it's become a thing that they do. And we've all gotten so professional at addressing notes. It just seems like, sometimes it feels like we joke about this, that the better we get at doing this, the more they want from us. And we always deliver. So I guess maybe they're not wrong. And then even after you've delivered, like I've definitely been on shows where you've delivered, like you have, for example, the surgery shows or real estate shows or whatever. If you have multiple storylines, like you have this. I know I did a foot surgery show.
Yes, we wanted to ask about that.
And each episode would have like 2 or 3 stories, usually 3 stories, right? So, but the network, you could cut a whole season of shows, turn them all in, and the network could then suddenly say, we want to restack these because we think, I'm not saying this did happen, but they could. They could say, well, we think this person would be better in an episode with this person.
Got it.
So then you're unlocking all the episodes and shifting everything around and relocking everything. But the timing's not always going to be the same because you have to be very strict and get right to the frame, It has to be timed to the exact frame. So it becomes a challenging thing that we've all just gotten used to and good at.
So how was it working on that foot show? I mean, Brooke was talking about it, and I mean, I can't imagine watching people's awful feet over and over and over again.
When I got hired for that show, they said, they actually said to me,
how squeamish.
Yeah, they did. They were asking that. And they said, if you have to get up, because it was during COVID, and we were all working remotely. We were all working from home. And the woman who hired me said, if at any point you have to get up and take a walk, go take a walk and get some fresh air and, clear your head. She was very like, we know this is hard stuff to watch. But after a while, you become, it's like you're just looking at a little box. Yeah. And this stuff is happening on this box, and I think the intention of the show helps because the person I worked for on that show, he's one of my favorite showrunners. Actually, I worked for him on several shows. He's very creative and very good-hearted individual who wanted to be very sincere about it, and he wanted to say that we're not fixing anyone. We're not, nobody's damaged and broken on this show. They're in pain and we're getting rid of their pain, and so we approached it that way. And that made it a lot it made all of it a lot easier to watch and work with, because you're like, you could track their improvement. And
it has a happy ending,
for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're happy that they got the help, it's changed their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, of course, if there's tears, you never cut away.
No, never.
And that reminds me a lot of how they structured Dr. Pimple Popper. I know you didn't work on that show, but it sounds like
but they were a lead-in.
Yeah, oh, they were. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I knew about Pimple Popper videos, and I remember her. And when I saw that she was going to have a show, I'm like, ugh, what? People are just going to watch people popping zits like all day long. But it really was interesting. The show was about these stories of these people who had, something that, whether sometimes it was smaller growth than someone else's, but it was always a story about how this impacted their lives and how hard this was, and how, they weren't going outside or they weren't doing this and that. And then the process of going and getting the surgery, and then what their lives are now. So it sounds very similar to that. Yeah.
It was very similar format. Again, going back to the format thing. And we did follow that format, but what we found is that on the foot surgery show, that once we started doing the surgeries, because again, we had 2 or 3 stories. So sometimes, if it was 3, the third story was just one scene. It was an office treatment, and then we would move on to the next story. Mm-hmm. But the surgeries would all kind of land in the back half of the show. Mm. And that's when people would they noticed people were starting to tune out.
Oh, back half of the show of that 1 hour episode, or of the
they would all happen in the back half of the episode. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
And that's when they would notice changes in ratings and people were starting to tune out and all that. So as we went along, the surgeries became shorter and shorter. Mm. What was once a 5-minute surgery, even if it was something really elaborate, it was just like 2.5 to 3 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe they just, people couldn't
watch it
anymore.
Yeah. I think that's what it was. I think because we went from all of this getting to know these people and caring about them to these really charming, funny, interesting doctors who we all loved. And then suddenly we're in the operating room. And honestly, if you spend too much time with the camera down in somebody's open wound, you got to just back up and show the room real wide and have the doctors making a joke, or else, because you need that relief, right? So what we figured out over the course of that season was that there was usually a moment that turned the surgery, right? Like that took the surgery from this is going to be really tough to yay, we figured it out. Now let's close them up and go. And so we started to look at it sort of a miniature version of what I was talking about with the home makeover shows, right? Where you look at the ending and go backwards. Mm-hmm. You'd find out what they would call a pop moment was, where everything changed for the better. You'd build the scene around that. You'd build the surgery scene around that. So, once they figured it out, yay, let's get out of here. Let's get it done and fixed and get out of here. Mm-hmm. And that was very short, but then you would only do the things that you needed, as little as possible to still tell the story leading up to that pop moment. And that's how we would do the surgeries.
Wow.
Psych Legal Pop will be back after these messages. Are you feeling lost or uncertain about your future? It's time to discover the true you. This is Tess Brigham from Psych Legal Pop podcast, and I want to tell you about my book, True You. In True You, I delve into the 6 key issues we all face during our quarter-life crises. From career dilemmas to relationship struggles, this book provides simple tools and techniques to navigate each challenge. True You is your roadmap to personal growth. Even if you're not experiencing a quarter-life crisis, True You will help you get to know yourself on a deeper level. If you're ready to unlock your true potential and create a life you love, pick up your copy of True You today. You can find more information on my website, www.tessbrigham.com, or it's available to purchase at Amazon.
Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fanfellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Stephen here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Stephen will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fanfellows wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, we could talk about this all day, but we want to pivot to talking about your film. It's just come out. It's available now, right?
Yeah, it's available now on Amazon and Google Play.
So it's called DancingDADS.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you are the, I believe. Well, why don't you tell us about? You know more than me. You tell us about how this project came about and who's involved and what it is and everything.
It came about because I'm a big sap. I'm a very emotional guy. My daughter and I were always very close. Tess knows my daughter. We were always really tight buddies. And she started to grow up and inevitably pull away, right? The way teenagers do, or the way 12-year-olds do, I guess, in the case of girls. I think with boys it's maybe a little later. I don't know. You tell me, Tess. But
yeah, the boys don't ever kind of pull away. They're always around, yeah.
And I think there's a difference, too, between moms and dads. I think moms have to carry a lot more load than dads do. So, and it's easier for kids to cut off, separate from their dads. In any case, but yeah, if you're a sappy dad like me, you lament that, And so there were plenty of us that were doing that. And all our daughters were at the same dance studio. And so we were given an opportunity to sign up to perform in the recital. And we would have to really step way outside our comfort zones because none of us are good dancers. We're all these kind of clumsy middle-aged men. And we would learn a choreographed dance number that we would perform in front of hundreds of people at the recital.
So this was an annual thing, right? They did it every year at the end of the spring, recital, end of the year kind of thing.
Exactly. It was like pulling teeth to get me to do it because I really didn't want to do it. But she begged me. And, I have a joke in the movie where I say, okay, I'll do it, but don't make fun of me. And she got so upset. She was like, that's the whole point.
Jeez.
To make fun of you. Anyway, so it was, I appreciated her. I did it. The first time I did it, I went in with a real bad attitude. I'm like, these guys are just goofing around. They don't want to take it seriously. They're not really trying to learn this dance. And why am I wasting my time? But by the end of it, I had so much fun that I was 100% in. I was going to do it every year that Emmy was a dancer at this studio.
So how many years did you end up doing it?
I ended up actually doing it 3 years because I did it so late. In her time there. She was there for 3 years total once I started doing it. And then she, went to high school and was doing other things.
So the documentary came about on which time you were doing it? The last time? When did you get this idea of I should start filming this?
No, actually, come to think of it, I did it 4 times. So the documentary was the third time I did it.
Uh-huh.
So the second time I did it, I had so much fun the first time. I did it the second time. I was recruiting dads to do it. The guys were going to have a blast. It'll be so much fun. And we did. We had fun again. And I started talking to the guys about why they were doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's what gave me the idea. Because, there was one dad who unfortunately didn't do it the year we filmed. And his whole thing was his daughter was very serious about dance, but then she suffered an injury and needed surgery and couldn't dance anymore. Mm. And he said, well, these were all her friends, so I'm going to do this. So at least once a year, she'll come and hang out with her friends at the dance studio. Wow. So everyone had their different reasons for doing it. And I thought there's something in this. So rather than... I guess I could have done, I had done scripted stuff before. They're like, well, why didn't you do this like a scripted comedy or something? Something told me I just wanted it to be real. Mm-hmm. I wanted to show that it was real and really happening. The dads were doing this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, So I thought, let's do a doc next year. And I started talking to the dads and they all seemed up for it.
Yeah, so it follows follows this process of the dads first having to learn the dance moves. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many weeks.
Yeah.
That process
it was about 5 weeks.
Okay.
About 5 weeks.
So in the beginning, it's very awkward. Some people have done it before, some people haven't. And, you're just trying to learn very, very simple, basic choreography, but it's very challenging for everybody, some more than others. But that's the thing. And also, because, my daughter was a dancer as well. And like people have no idea how hard it is. You know what I mean? You have to have some natural talent to begin with, but then you also have to work very, very, very hard to, and as a parent, you know how many hours and hours and hours go into them being able to do like one turn that looks good, you know? So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it brought like a new level of respect for what your kids were doing. I would
Oh, absolutely. Cause we're clunking around like we're wearing Frankenstein boots or something, you know? And they're teaching us very simple stuff, and we're just struggling to get it. You know? And they're doing much more complex things than we are, and the daughters are, and it's so effortless for them.
Yeah. Well, there's a scene where at one point, right, they come and they do the dance themselves, and they learned it within 10 minutes. Something like that. They're like, wait, what? It's like step ball change, this, move, move, move. Okay, here we go. And they just boom, 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 boom. And this was taking you 5 weeks. You're like, this is taking us weeks to get this.
Yeah, we all felt pretty humiliated. And afterwards, it's not in the movie, but afterwards, the dance director, the studio director came in. She's like, oh yeah, they wanted to do this. They wanted to make you feel like this. So of course, right, you know.
Yeah.
It was really delightful to watch them do that, actually.
Yeah.
To be in that room and see them. I get teary-eyed just even thinking about that day, because in the movie you see it too. It's afterwards, all these girls are jumping into their dad's arms, and we had such a great time together and hugging, and it's like, wow, we like kind of proved the point. You know, in that. So
yeah, it's a very touching movie on many levels. And, you know, you get a glimpse, and you profile a few of the families, and then you get a glimpse into the father's relationships with their kids. And, you know, they just so badly just want their kids to be happy, to succeed. They want to support this love of dance that they have. And this is, it's very sweet. It's very nice. And the fact that we would even contemplate doing that at all. I mean, I don't think you could have convinced me to do that. I mean, it's just so, but I have to say, you know, even through all the struggle of the 5 weeks and it goes right up to the very end. You're literally practicing in the parking lot, you know, before, you know, 5 minutes before the performance, you know, trying to make sure you got everything down. But when you finally go on stage and you see the dance, and, you know, you're all in your costumes and the lights and the music, it was like, oh my God, this all came together. You know, it was just because I wasn't expecting it, because maybe it's just the way that it was edited. It was focused on, you know, difficulties, learning the dance. And, you know, and I was worried. I was like, oh,
very nervous that you wouldn't be ready.
I was very nervous. But when I saw the final dance, it was like, wow, it was great. It was,
well, thank you. I will call the edit an enhanced version of the truth. We do get better as we go, and we do kind of figure it out along the way. I did the first edit pass myself before I handed it off to these two editors I've worked with many times in reality TV, who did a nice job themselves. But I told them, you know, like, I'm trying really hard not to cut out my mistakes because I'm in the film, right? And I didn't think that would be fair to the other dads. So there's some places where you see me, I'm just completely out of step, or, you know, if you know who I am. Most people wouldn't, I guess, know who I am, that I'm the guy that made the movie. But I'm completely out of step, not able to do, like, you know, we're supposed to shimmy. I don't know how to shimmy. So, yeah, it's things like that. So I try not to make myself look, you know, I guess through editing, we've learned in reality TV, you can make yourself look as good as you want. And I tried not to. I tried to keep it honest.
What was it like doing this documentary? Because you had done other shows, you know, you had worked on scripted things of your own before. So by the time you started this documentary, you had already been doing reality for a while. So did that really change things for you? Did you look at it differently?
You know, yeah, I really had to think about it, because I'd never done a documentary before. And I thought, so how is this different from scripted? How is this different from reality? And it is different. Like reality, you don't have time to explore. You are driving toward your point, you know, every second that you're on screen. You have, in most cases, 42 minutes, sometimes 22 minutes to get in and out and tell your story. there was nobody putting an artificial time constraint on this documentary, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know, like, what's the essence of making a documentary. So I started reading interviews with documentarians, people like Errol Morris and people like that. And I'm like, I'm not making an Errol Morris movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he did the Thin Blue Line and things like that. But I read an interview with Michael Moore. And even though I didn't do a Michael Moore style documentary where I'm walking around with a microphone and, you know, making myself the star of it, he did say something that really stuck with me, which was, you don't make a documentary, make a movie.
Mm.
You know, just make a movie. You know how to tell a movie story, tell a story like it's a movie. And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it plays like that in terms of, it does have a very traditional 3-act structure. I was able to find the moments in the reality and play them up. You know, like, for example, there's one of the dads gets an injury at one point. Well, that was just a natural place to have a down moment, you know, and, oh no, what's going to happen now? And then when I come back from that moment in the next shot, it's just a very slow fade up on a quiet room with, you know, a dog, you know, just to keep people in that moment of, it's not really suspense, I guess, but that moment of feeling like, oh no, something bad just happened. You know, can they come back from it? You know, and then I would spend from that moment on trying to see if we could come back from it, you know, things like that. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. No, it is. Because I could imagine that after just doing reality and watching hours upon hours upon hours of footage, that I just was curious about how it skewed it for you, because I don't know if you were, I assume you had a cameraman because you were also dancing, but sort of this, were you kind of thinking about the other dads and thinking, okay, what's his character? What's his character? Who is he? Like, he's going to be this kind of dad. He's going to be that kind of dad. Or was it very much like, no, the through line is we're doing this for our daughters. And to me, the film is really just, it's about this relationship that fathers and daughters have. And that, you know, especially when they're young, it's a moment in time and then it ends. And, you know, it's almost like you captured this moment of this special time for dad and a daughter.
Thanks. I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah. You know, it's,
Well, to answer your question, I did try a lot of different things because there's no rules, right? I had 2 terabytes worth of footage, and there was a 110-minute cut at one point, and just felt way too long. Really outstayed its welcome. The cut now is 72 and a half minutes, and it's tidy.
That's an hour and 12?
Yeah.
And before it was, what was the other one you said?
110 minutes.
Oh, 110. So, okay. I was thinking hour 10. I'm like,
so it was almost 2 hours long. And it's very long, very long. So 72, I think, is where we landed, and it works at that length.
Yeah.
But in the course of the entire process, I was like, okay, so I tried to do that. I tried to do that thing, like, who is each of these dads? Okay, this guy's like the fatherly dad. This guy is the jock dad, you know?
Yeah.
And ultimately, that didn't feel genuine, you know? And what you're saying, I'm glad, is what came through, which is they may have all been slightly different from each other and lead different lives, but they were all there for the same purpose. Yeah. And so the purpose became the star of the story.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Well, again, goes back to the story telling you what it wants to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Brooke, I have to laugh because the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking our father would never do this. There would be not enough money in the world we would never be able to get him to do that.
Oh God, no. He would be upset for us even bringing it up. You know,
he wouldn't even entertain it for a millisecond, like a millisecond. He told me when he said, yes, I'll pay for your wedding, but I'm not dancing. You know, I'm not going to make a speech and I'm not dancing. Don't ask me to do anything, but I'll pay for it. I'm great. I can write the check, but I'm not doing anything else. You know, he was very firm on that. And so, but watching it, you know, it's funny just watching it because I watched it when it was part of another festival. So I've watched it several months ago. So you are obviously, just like when you're watching reality television or documentaries, you think about yourself and you think about your life and what would this be like? And so it is this kind of funny, kind of melancholy, oh gosh, you know, that would be so nice. And I think, you know, to have, you know, a dad that would be willing to embarrass themselves on that level, just to be embarrassing and do something hard and do something challenging and put themselves out there. Really, truly, I feel like, you know, just to show their kid, to bond with their kid.
Yeah. And to show them, this is how much I love you.
Yeah.
That I'm like doing something very, very uncomfortable because I know it's going to make you happy. And, you know, Because all the daughters throughout the film, they're teasing their dads, teasing them relentlessly. And then, like you said, at the very end, after the show, every single one of them runs up into her dad's arms and is like, "Oh my God, you did so good." And it's just like, God damn it, we have to go through so much just to get some thanks here,
Yeah. And then after that, my daughter still makes fun of me, right?
Yeah.
I have this friend who saw it. He goes, and he's, a dad like me. And he was just like, I almost wish you'd had a moment where you're like, yeah, they're still just going to make fun of us. They're still going to be distant from us. But look, we have all these new guy friends now. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you could have gone that route.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't
true.
the story
That's
I was
interesting.
trying to get to, but that wasn't what I was going for. It's interesting that somebody saw that in it and interpreted it that way.
Because are you really close with the guys that you did it with now? Is that sort of this other plus? Or
one or two of them are still good friends, and I'll trust, and I'll probably I'll probably have them get involved in some other like one of them did it was like a Q&A for a festival with me. I invited him to do it with me because we're so close, and he was the guy who shows up late in the movie and has to run. He's in the parking lot and he runs. He puts money in the meter. He's a good friend. A lot of them have moved to other cities, or the dance studio has changed. With the pandemic, the dance studio kind of temporarily closed down, and then it reopened someplace else, and then it's different people running it now because the director and her husband are living a glorious retired life in Spain.
Wow.
So much time has passed that everybody's sort of moved on, but it's kind of fun. They're all watching the movie and going, "Oh, this was such a special time," But we do all share that, at least briefly. As long as we were all still at the studio, we all shared that a bond of we all did this thing together.
Yeah. How did you like being a dance dad? Apart from this film, but just over the years with
That was great. I mean. It was great. I always had little fantasies about, when my daughter was just a baby, about like she and I would take martial arts together or something like that, But no, it's like she found dance. That's what she wanted to do. And it was always so thrilling to watch her do it.
Yeah, I know, because it made me reminisce too. Because like I said, my daughter did all kinds of dance, but in the end, it was just exclusively ballet for over 10 years, and it's a big part of your life.
And it gives you an appreciation for the artistry of dance, right?
Oh yeah,
maybe you wouldn't have thought.
Oh, trust me, because before when I would see people dance, I'd be like, oh yeah, they're a good dancer, but they don't just come into this world being able to do that. It's like just hours and hours, and all the recitals and the Nutcracker, and yet you do become, you have that dance family. It's the same families. You're in one studio and year after year, and you become bonded, and it's sort of strange now. These people who I spent so much time with, I don't even see most of them at all.
I know, right?
It's like everyone the kids grow up, they go off, they go their separate ways, and then it's a very made me a little teary.
Teary-eyed.
I take it as a personal victory that we've steered the whole conversation in this direction, in part because we're talking about the movie. Because emotional impact is all I was going for. I just wanted people to laugh a little and cry a little, and hopefully appreciate their kid a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a great story. It's also a story about, doing things that are uncomfortable and doing them even though you don't want to do them, but doing them anyway, right? Yeah. Like pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, modeling a certain behavior for your child. I mean, that to me is, if I had a client whose parent, was debating whether or not to do this, I would absolutely say absolutely you have to do it, because you have to show your kid that, life's full of these scary, uncomfortable things, but you don't know there's going to be so many great things you're going to get from it. So just go for it and just see what happens. And it's not the end of the world. And who's going to watch you? It was a small dance studio, right?
Yeah, it was maybe 300 people, 400 people in the audience.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
And you're up there with a bunch of other people.
Now it's on a film.
Now it's on Amazon.
Now
it's on Amazon.
Yeah. But I've shown it to the dads. Like they all got free copies of it. I sent them links to it because they shouldn't have to rent or buy a movie that they're in.
Yes.
They come back to me and they go, thank you so much and for doing this, for documenting this period in my life with my kid. And they think they're really glad to have it. But Tess, I wanted to say something because you were like, your dad would never do this. I mean, my wife was sitting in the audience and after we danced, somebody behind her, a woman said to her husband, you should do that sometime. He said, there's a 400% chance I'll never do that, But we had a sequence. I mean, I had some material that didn't make it into the movie because there wasn't really a spot for it in terms of getting us to the story that we were trying to tell about other things dads do, that aren't this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one, I remember at the time there was one girl at the studio who she and her sister and her mom had come to LA. The dad was still back in another, Midwestern state somewhere, just working and paying for them to be there because that was what his daughter needed. And she needed to be out here working with the studio and blah, blah, I'm like, that's a sacrifice way bigger than looking like a fool on stage, And so I wanted to try to cover that. We just didn't have enough material to make a decent sequence out of it in a way that didn't feel like it was just coming out of left field. But I mean, everybody does. I think a lot of people do what they can do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And also, Father's Day is coming up in a few days, which is why we wanted to do this now, because fathers don't always get the credit. I think, we hear about the fathers who are not doing anything more than we hear about the fathers who are quietly behind the scenes, just day in and day out doing small things, big things, whatever. And, and we need to see that more because, our daughters need to see that, so they know, men are capable of this and, and this is what you should be looking for in some a partner or whatever. So,
and I think dads need to see how gratifying it can be.
Yeah.
To be that involved. I mean, I think there are a lot of dads that, are stoic and feel like, I did my part. That was another thing I'm hoping people get from this is that, or the dads will get from this is that like, you can do something that's uncomfortable for you. Kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
But your kid will appreciate it. Your kid will remember you for it.
Yeah. Well, do you want to give us an update on what your daughter is doing now?
Graduated.
She just graduated a couple weeks ago with a psych degree.
Yay.
And she landed a job very quickly with the company where she's doing behavioral therapy work, probably at an assistant level. And she's working and she's going to do some traveling this summer. She just left today for Memphis to visit a friend. And and then she's going to go to Europe for a couple of weeks and then come back and work for I think she wants to work for like a year before hitting grad school. Yeah. But I'm just really proud of her. She's really just...
Yeah.
She's become a real live adult.
Yes. Well, congratulations, Mom and Dad.
Yes.
This doesn't just happen, in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And, kids need a lot of support, young adults. It's not that easy to get through college. And I mean, I think about how our college, I don't know, I sort of stumbled through and graduated. I have a daughter who's going to be a senior in college this year. And God, it's so much harder now.
It's a lot harder.
Yeah.
Well,
and then the pandemic was in the middle of both of their experiences.
Yeah. But I also think this generation, I don't know if you feel it's true, Brooke, or not, but definitely with Emmy and her friends, they definitely have this feeling of our graduations got taken away from us from high school. Our prom got taken away from us. Anything can get taken away from us at any minute. So we're just going to relax and enjoy our lives and still pursue things, but we're gonna get these things in while we can.
Yeah, I think
that's why I travel and all that.
Exactly, and my daughter's a big traveler. She travels any chance she can get, and she travels alone. She does all this stuff I never would have done. And I think it's because, like you said, I remember, that whole pandemic thing, I think it was harder on me than it was on her. I was the one who was like, everything's getting messed up. And I remember one day I said something to her about how proud I was that she had kind of got, she didn't let it derail her. She didn't quit school. She actually transferred schools because it wasn't working, but she didn't just give up. And your daughter did the same.
We did the same. Yeah. And we did the same thing.
Yeah. And I said, because when I was
a lot of her
age,
friends actually.
Yeah. When I was her age, it probably would have derailed me, I think. I don't know. And so I said, I'm really proud for how you've handled this and you've stuck it out, whatever. And she just said, well, those were the cards I was dealt. So I just had to, I couldn't do anything about it. And so, they're very resilient and very, I think, appreciate whatever is going on right now and trying to make the best of the situation and travel and do all that stuff because they couldn't travel either, for a very long time. So
I think the lockdown really changed them for sure.
Oh yeah.
Really made them hungry to burst out.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I will defend Gen Z to the ends of the earth because people don't really understand them. And I think this is why people need to really recognize that, what is set out in the media. I think in the media, they make it seem like Gen Z is just falling apart and they won't take any jobs and they won't work and, any of that. And it just drives me crazy. So I love to hear these stories about Emmy, no, she figured it out. She transferred. I transferred in college too. It figured it out and then came home and then did this. And then, and now she's going to work and then figure this out. I mean, there's
she got a job that's related to her field.
Yeah.
I would have been perfectly fine if she spent a year slinging coffee. That would have been fine with me too. But she and her friends, what I see is that they're very driven to, I love Gen Z also. And I just have to credit top-notch Gen X parenting.
Yes, right. That is true. we're great parents.
We overparent sometimes.
Because it's 10 o'clock and do you know where your children are?
That's right.
Have you seen that? That video is going around again. And it was just so funny. The people that they got, Cyndi Lauper, and there was some, figures that sort of didn't age well, people that probably shouldn't be asking where we were, and that
there was
really was parenting.
Have you hugged your kid today? That was have you hugged your kid today?
Yeah. Do you know where they are?
Number one, do you know where they are?
Have you hugged them? Have you spoken to them? Have you prepared a meal for them?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Did you remember that you had kids?
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know, maybe if this was the roles were reversed, I mean, maybe if our father was a Gen Xer and we were Gen Zers, he would be more willing to get up and do these things. And I do think I think it also represents our generation and the fact that we are, we want to have that kind of relationship with our kids. We want our kids to feel safe and loved and seen. Yeah. And we understand so much more about parenting now and all that kind of stuff of what it takes to, how to help our kid get them gritty and, push past difficult things. And so it's just nice to hear that, Emmy's obviously very resilient and
she came through the house with 4 of her friends the other day just because they were between parties and they were going somewhere else. And we made them stop and talk, and they were just such wonderful kids, with such, great ideas about what they wanted. It was so cool. Of course, the thing that really intrigues me is the next step for a lot of us, which is empty nesting.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen Toy Story 4?
No.
I haven't seen any of the
Toy Story. Okay, Toy Story 4 is about becoming an empty nester. That's my theory.
Might have to watch that.
And your kids are going to be okay. So what do you want now? It's Anyway, it's not relevant to anything we've been talking about, but since it was,
So what's next for you? I mean, the industry is right. This is one question I wanted to ask you about, because we've seen more and more articles coming out about how hard it is to sell a show. People that have established, resumes that normally could sell a show, could get a show running. They're not getting shows up and running. Between COVID and the writer's strike, it's been a long 4 years for people in the industry and the SAG strike. Yeah. I mean, it's been a long 4 years of all of this.
Well, like I said earlier, I think I got lucky being non-union. I was able to, it's funny when COVID struck and I got hired on this foot surgery show, and then I was going to start March 23rd. So when I was going to start of 2020, and I was supposed to work in an office in Sherman Oaks. I was on my boss's Instagram, and he had a little video of him walking around the empty offices this was on the 13th, March 13th. He goes, I guess we're all working from home now. This is so weird. The office is empty. This is what his little video was. So I immediately sent an email to the line producer of the show I was supposed to work on. I go, so what do I need to do to be prepared to work from home? Because I hadn't started yet. I was panicking. And he wrote me back. He said, I don't know. I don't think they've shot any of your episodes yet. I just don't think we can have you on. And I melted. I was like, so sad. And so Megan, my wife, in all her infinite wisdom, said, just send a very positive email to your boss and the woman who hired you on and all this, and just say, thank you for the opportunity. Maybe next time, right? Mm-hmm. So I did that. And they immediately wrote back. They go, oh, no, I don't know what this other guy told you, but we're trying to get you in as soon as possible. But we just got to figure out what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. So that started, my boss had sold to TLC 10 episodes of telehealth shows.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
With the same foot doctors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, telehealth for the foot. Oh, okay. So
right. So that the patients would be doing these Zooming with the doctors, and they figured out to record HD Zoom and all this stuff. And we cut, 10 half-hour episodes of telehealth with these foot doctors. It was great. So we were all able to start working. And that actually started an incredible run of all through the pandemic. I worked all through the strikes. I was able to work. Mm-hmm. And then this year came along, and there's still one more unresolved union issue, which is IATSE, the crews, right? Like all the different crew unions, the crew locals that, need to be treated really well. And so I'm glad they're negotiating, and everybody's hoping it doesn't lead to a strike. But anytime a strike is even talked about, everything slows down before the strike even happens. It's the de facto strike that happens when studios go, well, if there's going to be a strike, we don't want to be buying a bunch of stuff right now anyway. Mm-hmm. So all work slows down. But I think if IATSE gets resolved pretty quickly, I think it's the end of June. There is the deadline. Mm-hmm. I think the latest article said that I got to read deadline and see where they are with that. But I think it's been going well. I think they've been making a lot of progress. And I think once that's pinned down, they might start buying stuff again and producing stuff again. Mm-hmm. And it could be another, nice 3-year run of, lots of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
it's not going anywhere.
No, and audiences are still hungry for material,
Yeah.
I don't like to use the word content.
And that's different.
Because I think
Why
content,
not content?
I personally think content is a word that they invented to make it less important, to make it more disposable. But I don't know. I mean, I guess a lot of what you would see online is really content. But audiences still want their shows. Mm-hmm. Eventually they're going to run out of their backlog of episodes. Mm-hmm. And they're going to need to produce stuff. So I don't know. I'm always I call it the Shakespeare in Love gambit. In Shakespeare in Love, they always, I'm going to misquote it badly, but they're talking about how a life in the theater is like a road set with all these troubles and hazards and all these problems, but it always works out in the end. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked how, and they said, we don't know. It's a mystery. Somehow it always bounces back.
So you feel like because all of the articles that I see, it's a lot of doom and gloom of Hollywood. Yeah. And one thing that really bugs me is I think a lot of people don't realize this is an industry town. There are a lot of people who are working paycheck to paycheck or, something like that have these jobs. They're part of a union, they work from job to job to job. And so when the larger audience hears about strikes and seeing that, I think they think about, Julia Roberts and George Clooney. They think about those people, but they're not thinking about how much it impacts everybody, everybody in the industry and how
the makeup artists and the caterers and the drivers everybody.
Because everyone's interconnected in some way, shape, or form. So,
yeah.
Well, it sounds
I'm an optimist. I am an optimist. But, it is definitely, it's probably, it's definitely a period of change. It's definitely, there's a contraction that's happened. And I don't know, it's not that different. You were here in 2008, right? Or were you not anymore?
No, I left. I was only there for 3 years. I left by
15 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. God.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Wow.
Because I've been a therapist, 20 years.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Right. And we were all crying, and you turned on your car, and that song from Dawson's Creek was playing, and we all busted up laughing. But it's 15 years ago there was a strike. There were strikes like this, and everybody was even in reality, everybody was out of work for a long time, and then it came back. To me, this feels familiar. Mm-hmm. It feels a little different. I think you have a lot more corporate heads trying to please their shareholders now by look how much money we didn't spend, That's different. Again, it comes down to people, especially Americans, are hungry for their TV shows.
I was going to say content. They're hungry for
Yeah.
Shows? What do you say?
Yeah. Oh, I said shows, materials, whatever. You can say content.
Materials.
Just because I bristle at it doesn't mean you should.
No, but you're not wrong in the sense that they're going after people who have these big followings, and they are the ones that built up the following and built up the attention, and then it seems like a lot of these big studios just want to capitalize on those people, and it's frustrating.
Oh, you already have 2 million people watching you? Great, we'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's frustrating. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us the background of what life is like on the other side of reality TV. You don't have any Sister Wives gossip or anything like that. You don't connect with the Sister Wives people at all?
It's not a show I've ever worked on, but I don't think it's probably all that different than any other docusoap, Yeah.
They also...
Everything I described,
They also move things around, right? What you're talking about, like a scene that happens here, then we'll see another scene and we're like, wait a second.
Right, it can happen. If there's ever anything that you go, wow, how did they get from there to there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or who knows? Maybe it's thematically linked somehow and somebody thought it would be better to pop it over. There's so many factors. And that's why it takes so long to make this stuff. I think a lot of people think it's easier and faster. It's certainly cheaper to make reality TV than scripted TV.
Yeah.
But, we don't see all the stuff that goes into it.
It's a puzzle. And actually the people that work in it really enjoy that puzzle, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and
how can I tell the same story? So I know you're trying to wrap up here. I apologize. But like on Iron Chef, we would have an hour of food, an hour of cooking that we had to get down to a half an hour. Right. So how do we tell the same exact cooking and not miss any steps, but do it in half the time? And that's how it is with a lot of the scenes in reality. It's like, okay, so what happened in the scene is X. How do we do that in 2 minutes instead of 4 minutes?
Because that's a big complaint, with Sister Wives. And, we talk a lot about Sister Wives, and we're also part of a community of people that also talk about Sister Wives. And a big complaint's always like, they're not showing us what's happening in order. And how do we know what's going on? We can't really, figure out what's happening, because everything's out of order. But there is something to be said for, right? Like, it's not that they're trying to trick us. It's not that they're lazy. It's none of those things. That it sounds like it's very much, they have to, number one, entertain us. And number two, stay on theme, make it make sense. And if it makes better sense to move something that happened in May to August, then that's just what's going to happen. And that's more important than, I guess, just telling everything in actual order. Then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Yeah. So,
and it's amazing how many conversations go into those decisions.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the documentary is out now on Amazon and
Google Play. Yeah.
And so that's very, very exciting. So is it free to Amazon subscribe? Like if you're Amazon Plus or
not yet. It's available to rent or buy.
Okay. Awesome.
If you want to buy it, go for it. But renting is fine too. But actually the one thing that I hope that I'm really excited about, people are starting to leave reviews.
Oh,
nice.
And so I'm getting to hear from people who've seen it that I don't necessarily know,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah. Oh, that's great.
There's a couple that I know that are friends or family members that wanted to support, and they wrote a review. Yeah, if people want to leave reviews, I love reading them. They don't even have to be good reviews. They can be, it sucked, 5 stars,
As long as it's 5 stars. Yeah. I don't care what you say.
I just want people to be honest, and if they enjoyed it, I have this old dumb joke. If you enjoyed it, tell all your friends. And if you didn't enjoy it, tell all your enemies.
Exactly. And so it would make a great Father's Day gift, or you and your dad can get together and rent it and watch it.
You can watch it with your dad.
Yeah.
It's just 72 minutes out of your day, It's
so
not it's not a huge commitment, but you'll be glad you did.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll have a link in our show notes with a link of how you can rent or buy Dancing Dads.
Terrific. Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Great to see you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoyed this interview. Just a few quick announcements. If you like our podcast and enjoy listening to us, please give us a 5-star rating and review, or just the rating on Apple. It does help us tremendously. Another way to support us is to follow the show and subscribe so that you're downloading all the episodes. Again, really helps us out. And then the last thing is, if you enjoy us and want to hear more from us, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/psychlegalpop. We do a bonus episode every week where we talk about popular culture topics. We just recorded one where we talked about the Kardashians and Andy Cohen and the Baldwins TV show. So some quick hits of little things that come out here and there. We also do a monthly true crime episode that is just for Patreon. It's not on our free feed at all. And a Ask Us Anything. So you can ask us questions about legal questions or mental health questions, or you can ask questions about us. That's fine too. So that's all for one. It's for the $8 tier. We only have one tier right now. So please go check it out. And I think that's it. You can follow us at PsychLegalPop on Instagram, or email us at psychlegalpoppodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellows wherever you get your podcasts.
That new thing? Yeah, we've got it. The Drop by GNC, bringing you all the newness that matters, handpicked by the pros who actually know what's up and what's proven to work. We keep you on top of the trends and dialed into what's next. Whether you're crushing it at the gym, leveling up your game, or thriving every day, The Drop by GNC is where the latest solutions in health and wellness land first. Non-stop innovation and fresh finds daily. Explore what's new and what's next on The Drop by GNC.
Give me a mountain with lots to do. Give me the sunshine, give me a dew. Give me something simple and true. All I need is sunshine and a cool, refreshing mountain dew. So give me my good friends, give me a dew.
Grab some friends and an ice-cold Mountain Dew today.
Mountain